Hey there, my friend, and welcome to this bonus episode for Series 1 here on the Erin Chase Show. I originally recorded all of the Series 1, Season 1 episodes before the global pandemic and crisis and social distancing and quarantine and all the things that have since happened in the last 3 months. And so I wanted to share a bonus episode specifically about being intentional in a crisis. And we're going to talk about how disruption and this state that we've been put into, the survival mode that we've been forced into, is affecting us, and what can we do and how we can be intentional as we walk through this journey. I do have a presentation or slides that I'm going to switch over to here in just a second so that we can go through this together. And I hope that you'll hear these words with an open mind and an open heart, and just know that I'm with you and I feel you and I hear you and I get you on all the levels. So one of the words you're going to hear in this episode is priorities, and it's something we talk about in the first season series of the Erin Chase Show. And I want to talk specifically about how our priorities have been affected and share some ideas of how we can get around those, and just how we can be intentional when we are in crisis mode. Here are the slides for this bonus episode. It's a little bit different from our regular episodes, but I wanted to share these just to give you a visual as I speak through these different things. And what I'm going to share today really applies to any crisis. It's not just this global pandemic and the quarantine and the social distancing that we've been thrown into at this current time, the time that I'm recording this, but it really is true in any crisis. And I feel like I'm in a position to share this with you right now because this quarantine really doesn't feel all that insane. Yes, it feels crazy. Yes, there's a lot of grief. Yes, there's a lot of feelings. Yes, there's a lot of overwhelm. But this is the third gut punch for our family in the last 6 months. Our house flooded. Then my dad got sick and unexpectedly passed away. And then the quarantine. So December, February, March. Third gut punch. And I have been thinking so much about the way that I'm navigating this, the way that my husband and I are communicating this, the way that we're working with our boys in all of this. And so I wanted to share a little bit about some of the things that I've learned along the way in these kind of the last 6 months specifically, but also in past seasons of my life. There's a whole lot of disruption and a whole lot of grief. I'm recording this in the afternoon. I spent an hour in bed earlier this morning after waking up and after getting going. And so there's a lot of this, and we're going to talk about what that looks like and what that means. And as I'm wading through the sludge and kind of pressing on, I think there's some key things that I've been able to learn, and I want to share those with you here and hope that they can sink in and be of encouragement and blessing to you. Here we're going to talk specifically about disruption, about crisis, about grief, and how we can be intentional, how we can walk with intention through these different seasons and phases that we are thrown through. And I want to share with you a quote that my assistant sent to me. She actually texted it to me, and I was like, wait, who is this? Who wrote this? And she's like, I did. And I was like, it's just genius. So I want to share it with you now because I truly believe this. You don't have to be a crisis while you are in a crisis or crisis mode or season or phase. And I really love that because it's such a good reminder that we have a choice in how we're going to respond to things. That's not to excuse that there are no feelings involved. We'll get into this, but I just love this, and I hope it's an encouragement to you that you might feel like you're a crisis right now, that you are a crisis, but you don't have to be one. And we can walk through with intention through these seasons. I want to share 2 key words. Actually, it's actually going to be 3 words that you're going to hear a lot as we move through this, and they are balance, progress, and then grace. We need to extend ourselves so much grace. And I think that the word progress and balance relates specifically to that word priority that we've shared and talked about and that I mentioned a few minutes ago. And I truly believe that we need to be intentional with these things. The priority that we have, staying focused on the priorities is going to be the key to navigating the sludge of any crisis. managing them well, identifying them, and then staying focused on them. So let me share a specific example from the last 6 months. The crisis of our house flooding and having to move out within 2 days. The priority was moving our belongings. That was the top priority. That was the only priority. Everything else fell away until I could get through that moving of the stuff. And we had to move school stuff, and we had to move stuff into storage. We had to move stuff to my mom's house. We had to move stuff to a rental house. We had to move a lot of things. It was a lot of thing moving. We threw a lot away. We took stuff to the dump. That was the only priority in that particular crisis. When my dad got sick, my only priority was being at the hospital and being with my family in that the 10 days that we were there, trying to balance that with, I wasn't home a lot. I was at the hospital, spending the night there, many nights. I think about half of those nights I spent at the hospital. And so that was the top priority, was being there with my dad and with my family. The key is identifying what the top priority is and then staying dialed in on that. Is it, it comes and goes. The priority changes come and go. With the social distancing that we're now in, my top priority is work. And I want you to hear this very carefully. My second priority is the kids and their schoolwork. I actually have a teaching master's degree in education, and I have been a teacher before, but I am not a teacher now. And I'm not trying to accept the identity of a teacher. Although I am kind of coordinating the boys' schoolwork. I'm more of a coordinator than I am a teacher. Will I help them? Of course. But work is my top priority and school is my secondary priority. I have been able to build my days around that, where I can do, here's the 2 hours that we have slotted for school, and then I have the remainder of the day to do to work on other things. The key is understanding where your priorities are. My reasons for work being top and school being secondary are because that's how they've always been, not in a global pandemic. My work priority and then is, while the kids are at school. And so with this shakeup, I've continued to stay focused on those priorities, that priority top, that priority second. Those are just examples. Yours don't have to be the same. If you are able to make the school work, the homeschool, distance learning, whatever you want to call it, the top priority, great. You determine your priorities and you be intentional with your priorities. The key, again, with priorities is being able to be intentional in identifying those priorities and then being able to accomplish the things that you need to get accomplished. So some days that's just taking a shower. I go back to when we're thrown into this sort of survival mode. I go back to like newborn phase. Like it was great if I could take a shower when there was a newborn in the house, right? Or maybe it's just eating one balanced meal. Another day, your priority could be that you have to meet a looming work deadline, right? So and your priorities might even shift from day to day. So my work is number one priority in general, and then number two would be the kids' schoolwork. There's other things going on here, but those are just two examples that I share, but they also could change on the day to day. So with any crisis, we get kicked immediately into kind of grief mode. And let me go back up here. I think when this whole social distancing immediately started, I was still am, immersed in the grief process with my dad. And it felt so similar in those first couple days of the social distancing. So I really kind of cued in that this whole thing is very much, grief ridden, the stages of grief and the exhaustion that comes from grief. Grief is like waves or contractions, and they kind of come and go. And I think that with the things we've talked about here is being intentional and having our priorities and balance and progress, I think all of those things have to come together as we ride the waves, if you will. So what is the waves? Or a contraction, if you will. It's you have these moments of just tough pain and overwhelming sadness and depression and grief and tears and the mental overload of all of that. And then you're followed by, in the example of birth, like what? There's a baby the size of a watermelon that needs to come out the size of a lemon. Like what? Like if you've birthed a child, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like you kind of forget that you just had this awful contraction and then you kind of come into this high. And so I think the same is true with these seasons of grief and crisis, is we kind of have to ride the waves. We need to feel the feels of the low, and we need to ride the motivations of the high. You got to let them be. You got to lean into them. You got to express all these things, right? Which is why I laid down for an hour earlier today. It's really important to ride the ebbs and flows of the motivation. And here's another example. When my dad was in the hospital, I wrote one of the best emails that I've ever written at 5 o'clock in the morning after having 2 hours of sleep, because I was struck with inspiration, really. The words hit me and the motivation hit, and I just sat there. It didn't take me very long, typed it up, and sent it over for, we have a process for all of this in our work, and sent it over for proof. You kind of have to ride that. Did I feel bad writing that email while I was in the hospital? No, because I was there with my dad. I had been there with my family. Like, I was struck, so I did it. The same thing, another example from this quarantine last week. I think it was week 6 of this quarantine. I just had a really tough Tuesday. I don't really think I did anything. I don't think I did anything productive. Just came out of nowhere, a lot of feelings, just kind of laid there, didn't have any motivation. I didn't push it. I just let it be. And I do have the flexibility to do that. I did have to make up for it later in terms of accomplishing some of the work tasks that were on my list for that week. But I rested. I leaned into the fact that tomorrow's a new day, and it's gonna hopefully be better. And I did. And the next day I accomplished a lot. So I rode the low, and then I rode the high. And it's what I have found is if you're listening to this, I'm doing kind of a wave motion with my hand. I found that the highs and the lows are really high and then really low. And then over time, as you continue to progress, there's that other word, through this, the waves kind of get, I don't want to say softer, shallower, if you will. The highs and lows get shallower. And then I think that's where, kind of that new normal, that phrase we're tired of hearing, comes into play. And so I wanted to set these kind of concepts up for you so I can share some practical ways to navigate through this, apart from offering yourself grace and just being there and being in the moments and riding the waves. And the first is redefining your days and week. We work, most people work kind of Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Now we have our kids at home. They're not at school Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So we've been kind of tossed into this, like, okay, now we're working from home and they're working from home and we're trying to figure this out. And I'm my 8-year-old's assistant now, like I have a 7-year-old's assistant. And my 10-year-old's executive assistant. But I've had to redefine my days and weeks, and I've had to redefine how and when tasks get accomplished. And so when the social distancing started, I was working in 15-minute blocks. I could not commit to doing any more than 15 minutes of work, and it was typically very simple admin type tasks that didn't require a lot of deep thought or deep motivation to get completed. So working in 15-minute blocks. I think now I'm probably closer to 30 to 45-minute blocks that I can push through, in maintaining kind of that, riding that motivation and maintaining that balance between everything that's going on with work and school and working out and all the different things that I have happening. And traditionally, I work an hour and a half long blocks. I can sit and work onto a project for about an hour and a half, really get into that deep work. And I've probably only had 1 or 2 sessions of deep work in the last 6 weeks. So I'm just trying to, instead of taking an hour and a half to really dig into something, I'm just doing it little by little by little by little in 15-minute blocks, now 30-minute blocks. And I will continue to progress and expand that time frame till I kind of get back to what will hopefully get back to my hour and a half long block schedule that I do for myself. So typically I work Monday through, before the global pandemic and before all these crises, I work Monday through Friday, about 10 to 3, 9 to 3, depending on if I'm going to the gym or not. And I'm really had to redefine that. Now I pretty much work in the afternoons and I work in the evenings, and I spend a good chunk of the weekend working, and I'm probably still working about the same number of hours. I've just redefined what those hours are and what days they are happening. I've redefined what rest is. Rest for me right now is resting. I've typically not worked on Sundays. That's just kind of always protected that day. And rest now is really more spread out through the week as I'm riding the lows and the highs of these waves. And so it's important to acknowledge these adjustments and redefine the way that you're setting up your days and your weeks as you continue to move through and progress this. When our house flooded, I went back to 15-minute blocks. I would record, in an urgent moment, a 15-minute video so that another team member could handle something that I just couldn't get finished because I literally had no computer time. I would just jump on for 15 minutes. I remember doing stuff in the middle of the night when I would think about it at 1 a.m. when I'm trying to fall asleep. But let me just do this really quickly so I can get it off my plate. Being able to do that has really helped me continue to stay focused, continue to meet goals, continue to be able to produce the things that we need to produce to keep our business going, lights on, as well as progressing. I want you to consider, what does your work week look like? And how much should you be accomplishing right now? I don't have the same productivity expectations of my team right now because I know everybody's exhausted. We're all trying to balance this together. And so I want you to consider what it looks like to redefine your work, your schoolwork, your productivity levels, your hobbies, all these things. Redefine it is number one. Number two, thinking in terms of progress. And again, this kind of feeds off of what I just shared about kind of 15-minute blocks to 30-minute blocks to hour-long blocks, kind of moving through that. And I think when you can, when we're kicked into survival mode and we kind of have to strip down to the bare minimum, being able to just work for 15 minutes is a great accomplishment. That is great productivity right there when we're in survival mode. And so I think it's really important for us to sort of create these I want to say progressive boundaries or progressive structures for ourselves and for our families. I think especially right now because we're all at home together, it's really important to do that together with our families. And I want you to think in terms of progress. I want you to not beat yourself up when you have a crappy day. Just don't. It's not the added grief or the added guilt, I guess, is just not worth. It's just not worth it. You can give yourself permission to have a crappy day, to ride that low, but also give yourself permission to power through and work at these crazy hours, right? Redefining these boundaries and redefining these structures and thinking in terms of progress is going to help you both at the big picture as well as kind of on the day-to-day in terms of what needs to be accomplished and how, realistically productive that you can be. But I think that if you're gonna use any word here, it's gonna be the word progressive. The productivity boundary is 15 minutes at a time, and that's gonna progress back to an hour and a half block. That's how I personally operate. Being able to accomplish a small thing is a big win right now. Maybe before you would just be like, oh, thanks for getting that done. Now it's like, woohoo, we got that finished. Okay, what's next? It's just a different level of it's a different level of progress. If you can kind of go back to our priorities that we were talking about earlier, what are the top 3 priorities that you have for yourself? What are the top 3 priorities that your family has? Like, work through all of that together. As you're talking through it, as you're asking questions, as you're working together, you will start to figure out, okay, I have one child that does not need structure. He can get his work done. He doesn't need structure. He doesn't need me to say you need to be starting school by 11 a.m. He just doesn't need it. He gets the work done when he gets the work done. He needs the one thing he needs is quiet. It just needs to be very few distractions, right? So we've worked through all of that together as a family. Number 3, balance. Okay, balance and grace. I'm going to throw grace in here with this balance conversation. You've got to get in tune with the contractions and the waves of the grief and the emotions that come, and you got to work with them because it will bounce. How does a wave work? A wave has a high and it has a low, but what's in the middle is the balance, right? And you've got to work with them instead of against them. I feel like we try to talk ourselves out of the low, but that's just counterproductive and it's working against the wave. But we've got to work with the wave. There's no rules or judgments. I'm sharing my personal priorities and experiences and boundaries and structure and productivity ideas with you here, but there's no rules here. There's no judgment. You're not getting judgment from me. This is tough. And this is kind of what this looks like. If your priority is to take a shower, take that shower. That's a big win right there. If your priority is to stop eating cookie dough, that was one of my priorities, I think in week 2 of this, and I managed to stop eating the cookie dough. If your priority is to exercise, grab an accountability partner. Find somebody that you can that can cheer you on. If they don't have to be exercising, they can be in their bed texting you, cheering you on while you're out there on a run. If your priority is a work deadline, set aside a couple 15-minute chunks of time that you can work and make progress towards that. So whatever, if your priority is adjusting to this work-life balance thing, try different things. Like, you don't have to have a set structure unless you need one. If you have a child who needs a structure, then definitely create that structure. But you've got to work together and work with your people. But I think here the key is tuning in, resting when you need to rest, sleeping. I slept in and took a little rest time this morning. Like, it's a lot, but I also know the limits, and I want to respect the boundaries that I have for myself so that I can be my best when I'm riding the top of the wave. Tuning in, getting balanced, and making progress towards whatever it is you're making progress towards. Again, I don't have any set list or checklist for you. There isn't one in a crisis. There's not a checklist in a crisis, but it's allowing yourself to ride through the waves and working back towards that balance and going with them as the waves start to sort of flatten out. You might get hit, kind of out of nowhere. I felt like fairly balanced with shallower waves. And then we got the call a week or two ago about now school's canceled for the whole year. Well, I got hit again with another wave. And, so things are going to change, even as we go through this. Let's move into the last of our episode. We close each episode with think, feel, take action. So this is what I want you to be thinking of. What can I do to make progress? What can you do? What boundaries can you create or change? Working with your family, communicating. What structure do I need to put into place to help myself and my people? I want you to be thinking about balance and progress, and then extending yourself grace too. I think that is really, really important, is the grace. I kind of touched on it here and there, but it's really, I want you to hear that woven through. Giving yourself grace and allowing yourself to ride the waves, I think, is ultimately what it's all about there. Next, we have feel. These are our words: balanced. I want you to feel like you're making progress. I want you to feel the waves getting smaller. I want you to feel your way through the waves when they come back and smack you. I want you just to feel all the way through that. And then take action. I want you to write down your top 3 priorities for today and your top 3 priorities for this week. And I think the key here is understanding that you have kind of big picture priorities. One of them can just be stay balanced and stay sane, right? That's kind of a big picture one. And then a more specific one for today. What am I going to do today? I'm going to go by myself and take a 30-minute walk around the neighborhood. Like, what's one thing that you can do? Maybe you're tired of walks. Maybe it's that you need to take the ice cream into the closet. If that's your self-care for today, go ahead and do it. No judgment here. So I want you to be thinking about your priorities in this crisis. And, you might need to be in a wave of motivation in order to take action on this. But I want you to think about, priorities and how they relate, how you can, continue to work towards whatever it is you need to be working towards, accomplish whatever it is you need to accomplish. Sometimes it's just getting through the day. Sometimes it's getting that shower, right? What are the priorities for today, and what are the priorities for next week? Maybe right now is a perfect time to do this because you've just been, hearing this and being encouraged and inspired and understanding a little bit more about what is happening in your mind and in your heart, feelings, and all the things that are going on. All right, I want to remind you and come back to this quote here. You don't have to be a crisis while you're in a crisis. I think if we can continue to focus on balance, focus on progress, focus on grace, that we can walk ourselves through a crisis with intention in our mindset, in our interactions, and our relationships with our family, and all the things that kind of come at it. Being intentional in a crisis is about balance. It's about progress. It's about grace. That's what I wanted you to hear in this bonus episode. Because I'm recording this on the fly, I do not have a worksheet for you, but if you just, write some of these things down that we've just talked about here, the think, feel, take action in your journal, or just on a piece of scratch paper is fine. I think it's good to get those things out of your mind and out of your heart and onto paper. Do that now. And of course, I would love for you to subscribe to the Erin Chase Show. We have a few more episodes here in series 1, and then we'll be back later in the year with the next set of episodes for you. So that is all for this bonus episode, friend. It's bye for now, and we'll talk again soon.